titled this episode Grief and Grieving. It might be kind of a heavy episode. So hopefully you can hang with me, and hopefully I can keep it together, because it's been one of those weeks. Sunday the 7th was the 4th year anniversary of Neil Peart passing away. And his passing away was a little strange for me, because I did grieve a little bit. Like, he was the first celebrity or high-profile person I had never ever met. I had no relationship with this person, but I did have tears, and I had all these emotions and things like that. And I thought it was interesting to have those feelings, or to think about somebody I had never met and that the impact they had on my life. I was just trying to navigate how I felt through all of that stuff. You see, when you see a celebrity pass away, actors and musicians, Prince, for example. When Prince died, you kind of go, what? And you could talk, but I wasn't moved necessarily emotionally hearing that. I was kind of shocked and disappointed and things like that. I remember, I think it was in the early 90s, maybe 91. I meant to look up, but I don't remember. But I remember when Stevie Ray Vaughan had died, and the people I was working with were really upset. Especially one was just, sobbing that Stevie Ray Vaughan had died. And I knew of Stevie Ray Vaughan, but it wasn't a style of music that I really listened to. But here's this person just grieving like crazy over somebody he never met. And so to me, that was really strange. It was strange, but at the same time, it's really revealing of the impact that these people can have on our lives, whether it's kind of a fantasy land feeling, or somebody actually made a huge impact on your life that you never even met or knew. So those things are kind of odd and strange as far as I'm concerned. And then when you lose a parent or something like that, or when you lose a loved one or anything like that, yeah, there's a lot of grief that accompanies those things, and a lot of strange feelings, a lot of questions of why this happened. Did God hate me? Or God's not real. He would never let things like this happen. I've never been preaching necessarily on Facebook Live. I try to be really delicate with what I believe in things, because we are in social media, and so it's easy to attack each other. So I'm not opening the door necessarily for any of that, but I do believe in God, and I believe there's somewhere we're going to go, and I have a lot of confidence and faith in those things. I see people post, it's the anniversary of my mom's death or my dad's death, and happy heavenly birthday. I saw somebody had posted, this has been years ago, had mom been alive still, she'd be 118 years old. 118. If you were 118 years old and you were still alive, would you want to be? I don't know. I guess it depends on the quality of your life at that point. I'm 50, and there's certain ailments and things that are coming along that you're just like, oh, yeah, I'd be okay never dealing with that again. Let's see. Greg always has great stuff to say. Greg says, I think pieces of it make us aware of our own mortality. I was affected profoundly when Eddie Van Halen passed away. Oh yeah, he was one too that is a more recent history of a incredibly influential musician, and like the guys in Rush, Eddie Van Halen was definitely a trailblazer in new things. His I'm not a guitar player, so I can't make claims to know much about that, but uh, definitely in his Frankenstein guitars to make certain sounds, and just the talent that just came from his soul into all of that. And to us as an audience, seemed pretty effortlessly in how he did. You know, those people are really rare, and they come along every once in a great while and really leave a mark on the world and in culture and the effect that they have on us. Definitely for sure. But you know, going back to grieving, it's you know, I've seen people that have lost a parent, and every year they'll post something, and I do that too, because my dad had passed away in a plane crash when I was 6 years old, and I've mentioned that many times throughout the years, and I never really think about how old he would be now if he were alive, because he was 33. So I don't think in those terms necessarily, and I don't go, I hate 1978 because of this. I don't blame 1978 for that. And it's interesting too, because it's a new year. We talk about new resolutions, and you know, it's the beginning of a new year, and so we all think in terms of this year's going to be better than last year because of these reasons. You know, some people say F 2023 because something horrible happened in their life. I personally don't think in those terms, like calendar wise. Like, I don't blame the calendar. I don't blame the year. It's just a year. But I think what I'm trying to get at, I guess, is as ugly and as horrible as some of this stuff seems, it maybe is necessary for us. And for me, in my mind, I'm not telling anybody how to think or how to feel, but I really do believe that God has a plan for all of us. And I'm not in a position to second guess that, I guess. So first of all, I wanted to read like what the definition of grief is, because people can grieve for long periods of time, and I think that's perfectly okay. And we have our reasons for doing that way, and I don't think that any of those reasons are invalid or unwarranted or anything like that. But here's the definition of grief. Grieve is a natural response to loss. Emotional suffering you feel when something or someone you love is taken away. Often the pain of loss can feel overwhelming. You may experience all kinds of difficult emotions, from shock or anger to disbelief, guilt, and profound sadness. So those are all, you know, exactly those kind of feelings that we all feel if somebody has been suddenly taken away. So talking about Neil Peart passing away is, I'm trying to get my other computer, sorry, to pop up so I can see comments easier. There we go. Like I mentioned, Neil Peart, when I heard that he had passed away, of course, the general public had no idea that he had been sick and he had a brain cancer or a tumor. And like reading this book, this Cultural Repercussions, you know, I started looking on YouTube for recent interviews of Geddy Lee. Geddy Lee has a new book out called My Effing Life, which I want to get and read that because it sounds extremely interesting. And he's been kind of on this book tour, and he also did a book about bass guitars, which I don't know much about that. But I stumbled across an interview with Geddy Lee, and they were talking about Rush ending. And there are many times that you would see throughout this book where Rush may have been done. And one of those was in 1997 or 8, I think, somewhere around in there. Neil Peart's daughter was killed in a car crash. And I think she had been visiting for Thanksgiving or Christmas or so. I don't remember the circumstances exactly. But, you know, when you have the police show up at your door to let you know that your daughter was killed in the car crash, that is, as you can imagine, is pretty heavy stuff. So that would be that shock of grief. And Neil Peart went on to talk about the loss of that, the shock of that sent his wife into an extreme deep depression to where she passed away about a year later. It turns out she had died from some type of cancer, but Neil Peart had said in many interviews that he felt like she just actually died from a broken heart, that when their daughter was killed, that she just went into this extreme deep depression and never recovered from that. And I think when we're in deep depression like that, I've had a moment of depression in my life where that can cause you to feel physically ill. And, you know, people around me that I know that have been in deep depressions tend to have a lot of sickness that accompanies them. I think it's just weird how our body will react to those kinds of things. But in this interview with Geddy Lee, he talked about when it was getting closer to the end, and they didn't know how much time they had still to see Neil or to talk to him. But Geddy Lee had talked about they would have phone calls quite often, and Neil Peart had moved to Southern California, and that's where he was living at the time. I guess he had a off-site location where he had these special cars that he liked to spend time with, and this person would take him to this location to see these cars, and every day that he went, he would listen to a different Rush album, just remembering their body of work and all of that, and then sharing with Geddy Lee. He had what did I write? So towards the very end of Neil Peart being alive, he was having these discussions with Geddy Lee and said that telling Geddy Lee how proud he was of the music that they had created together and how proud he was of them as a rhythm section between bass and drums, and then how proud he was and thankful of their friendship that they had. And it was really hard-hitting to watch, and you can see Geddy Lee getting a little emotional, and I'm watching it just kind of getting a little emotional myself. Just, I think, because we connect with people, and we can easily sympathize or empathize with people going through rough times. So part of what I'm trying to get to is, I've been kind of avoiding it a little bit, and I don't mean to, I'm going to try to stay pretty just hit the highlights, I guess, without going too deep. So we're beginning this year off by we're losing my mom. So we have limited time with her left. It's so what's going on? It's not cancer, but my mom has an extremely rare. I'm gonna get through this, I promise. My mom has an extremely rare brain disease that affects very little people. I think it's like less than 1,000 cases worldwide a year that this affects people. And it comes on really, really fast, and it declines you very, very fast. So, and so I've been, sorting out these emotions and trying to reconcile my feelings and things of that nature. And, we're watching everybody around us, having trouble, except my mom. My mom has been remarkably calm, and I think she's accepted what's happening, and because we have this faith, she's secure in what's next for her, which is pretty awesome. So, we're having a lot of family discussions and sharing stories and those kind of things. And but what this disease does is it causes dementia-like symptoms really fast. And my mom's definitely experiencing those. Like the short and long of it is, about 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks of December, my sister and my dad noticed a sudden change in my mom's behavior and her speech, and having trouble connecting words and things like that, and balance issues. And so my dad had, uh, my sister and brother-in-law are currently living with my parents because they moved home from Texas. So thankfully that dad and mom have this help with my sister living right there with them. So it's worked out really well in that regard. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so they noticed this decline. And so my dad had texted me and said, told me that my mom wasn't doing well and that I should call her. And so I did. And we all thought it was part of, she had been having nerve pain in her right hand for like a year. And then in recent months, that pain had moved to her left hand, and then to her feet, and to her taste buds, of all things. So they were here at Thanksgiving, and my mom was telling us that she was having all this nerve pain. And so we thought that was what it was, and trying to get to the bottom of that. And so this finally convinced her to go to the ER. So excuse me, my sister and my dad took her to the ER on the 31st, the morning of that, and started running tests like crazy to figure out what was going on. So whatever tests they do, everything was coming back fine, and this MRI scan of her brain revealed this this problem. And more tests and things like that just kept pointing, narrowing down and narrowing down. It's called CJD. If you're interested, you can Google that. I don't know how to pronounce it exactly, but just a quick Google search of that will give you a really quick overview of what's going on, and those kind of things. But so my mom does better in the morning, and as the day goes on, she has more trouble speaking clearly and understanding. So we're in the midst of that, and it's it's hard, as you might imagine. But one thing that I talked about was, I mentioned earlier, and I mentioned off and on, that my dad had passed away when I was 6 years old in a plane crash. And that was a pretty traumatic thing, as you might imagine, especially being a young kid. Like, you think back to when you were a young kid, or look at your own children. Kids don't know a lot of people. You know your parents and siblings if you have them. So that's your whole world. And then so when you lose a parent, that's a gaping hole in your life, which it was for me, losing my dad. But I was talking with my dad and my mom about that whole experience for me, and thinking, yeah, it was awful at that time, and it's still awful. And I still, have trouble sometimes talking about that and navigating those emotions. And that was it was 45 years ago, climbing up on 46 years ago, that all happened. And still to this day, I'm still grieving, so to speak. I have my moments where it's tough. But had that not happened, this is the crazy part of this whole thing. Like, I told my parents, I said, had that not happened, and my stepdad's been dad to me for all this time, so I rarely make that distinction between, my biological father, if you will, and my stepdad. Stepdad's just been dad. So I appreciate him. But what I was getting at is, had that not happened, I wouldn't have the life I have now. Which is strange to acknowledge and recognize, is that this horrible thing happened, or it seemed to be horrible, and I'm not saying it isn't, but it caused your life to go from here to a completely different direction. And I used to get caught up, especially when I was younger, about like what my life would have been had my dad not died. And I don't recommend, trying to figure that out. I don't recommend it at all, because it's not a door you can open, because there's no way to look inside. And so why invest a lot of time and emotion on what ifs or what could have been or anything like that. All I know is that happened. My mom got remarried. I've had my stepdad all this time, and I think because of that, I ended up becoming a drummer at the age of 10. And I've been doing some interviews recently on teaching and drumming and recording and those kind of things. And part of what's come up in these interviews is this story that I've shared before about how I got my first drum set. And so I was resharing that story with my parents on Sunday when we were all sitting around the table. And I said, first of all, if Dad hadn't died in that plane crash, Tim, my stepdad, wouldn't be here, which means my two younger sisters wouldn't even exist. I probably wouldn't be married to this amazing wife. And then I joked, I said, she's amazing most of the time. I wouldn't have the kids I have. I wouldn't have the friends I have. I wouldn't have this life I had that not happened. And so something that seemed really extremely terrible at the time, later in life has revealed itself as being a thing that was necessary to have what I have now. So you could look at that as, well, I look at that as that was God's plan all along. So that's, try to wrap your head around that sometimes is strange and difficult. So I look at it as a blessing now, as odd as that may seem. Like that was something that was necessary to happen in my life to have the life I have right now. So in 2020, is that right? Yeah. Yes. I keep forgetting it's 2024 now. I had a spot on my neck. Which side is that? I don't remember. Over here. Had a spot on my neck that over the years had... Now, Mary says she noticed it, but it ended up being skin cancer. Excuse me. Melanoma, of all things, which is extremely dangerous. I had that surgery in August of 2020 and had that removed, and now I go to the dermatologist all the time to get checked out. And that was kind of a scary thing to experience. Luckily, it was caught very early, but melanoma can be a fatal condition. And I'm sure some of us watching have probably known somebody that has died from that. But that was another thing in my life that you could look at as that's a horrible thing, and it is. And there's no one thing you can point to that said, had I done this differently, this would have never happened. We're just living our lives, man. And can't live in a bubble. We can't live in a world of what ifs. We can only live in the world of what is, and try to steer our ships in the best direction possible. So that's, what we're doing. Mary and I had mentioned we're reading these books and trying to advance our careers and those kind of things. It's all great stuff. It's mindset stuff, making a plan and moving forward. So having that skin cancer, I look at also as this is a blessing. This happened because it forced me to make choices to become a full-time musician, which is what I had wanted to be all along. And I think some of these things come into our life to go, oh, this is really bad, but it's a big shove to make different choices. And so now here we are at the threshold of losing my mother. And So when we were sitting around the table, I mentioned all these things, and I said, "This seems really, really bad right now," and I'm not saying it isn't, but what kind of impact is that going to have on the people around us as Mom goes through this? What kind of testimony will that be? And they've been having friends and family visit and call, and I think it's been really great. I talked to my dad later in the evening last night to see if it was too much with people stopping, and he said he was really tired and he's not sleeping well. Of course, none of us are, but especially him. I think he would like to have a night where he just can sleep and rest and feel better. But he really enjoyed it because it helps them to think about something else for an hour or two as people are visiting, and to talk and reminisce and appreciate each other too, which was really great. So what stories are we going to be able to tell a year from now, or, well, maybe closer to 6 months from now? It's she's not going to make it much longer. So there's that. But, going back to when I said, had my dad not died when he did, I probably wouldn't have the life that I have now. And sorry, I'm getting a little scatterbrained, but when I talked about doing these interviews and I'm talking about getting my first drum set and how that came to be and what that led to, I was telling my parents, I said, me sharing that story, that story wouldn't exist had my dad not passed away. And what kind of impact is that story having on people in the drum teaching community? What impact is that story having on teachers in general, if they happen to see that? Because that was just a weird thing. I can't get too far in the weeds with that whole that whole discussion right now because I'm focused on my mom. But I said, how many people is that story of Dad getting me that drum set the day after my band teacher said not to? And Mary had interjected too some thoughts that how that might spread. I can't think of them at the moment, sorry. But just that story and the impact it may have on other teachers, drum students, and those kind of things, and fueling a passion that somebody has. It's really, really important. So I said, that's one thing that wouldn't exist. I said, how many of those things are out there that we're not even aware of that are affecting people in a great positive way just by that one thing? So the cancer story too was a big thing on causing a change in your life of things. So Mary said your dad had said he didn't realize the impact that it had on me. Yeah. The go get the junk out of the truck thing is what he said. Oh my gosh. Whoo-wee. It's heavy. It's a heavy day. It's a heavy day for sure. Yeah. Pretty big big thing there. I'm trying to keep up with comments and things on this other computer, and it's not I mean, it's working, but not in a way that yeah, Mary says it's been a heavy week for sure for all of us. One thing that was going on is my dad started having my mom put together this 1,000-piece puzzle. And they had been working on it, and before they took her in, and my dad just thought it would be really great to keep moving with what was going on with her brain, like give her something to do to stay active. And so they had a bunch of this done that my mom and my sister had worked on. And so when we went over there this weekend, my 10-year-old was excited that there's this puzzle. And my dad at the moment was thinking that he he wanted to leave the rest for my mom to do. Well, you're talking about a 10-year-old kid who's excited, and so Jude was like, okay. And then my mom comes and sit down. She's like, Jude, help me with this. And they had this little moment of like confusion going on, and Jude wasn't really understanding. So Mary pulled him aside and talked to him a little bit about that. But as the day got closer to the evening, we were all sitting around and crying and sharing stories and all this stuff that I'm talking about. And I said, I've got 50 years of memories with my mom. And I said, I'm looking at my 10-year-old son making memories with her right now because they finally had relaxed on the puzzle building thing. And I told my dad this last night because he brought it up. He said, I wanted to thank you for the puzzle thing. And I said, well, what are you talking about? And he said, I learned something from you that, you know, you have all those memories of your mom, and now your son's making memories, and he thought that was really special moment that he realized, and it was really great stuff. I mean, as rough as this whole thing is at the moment, it's going to be okay. So, what else was I going to say? Whew. I told you it was going to be heavy. Told you it was going to be heavy. It's one of those things. It's a subject that's difficult to talk about, even when it's not affecting you personally. I wanted to let people know that this was going on in my life in a very respectful way to my parents, first of all, as social media can be a toxic environment if you let it become that. And trying to keep some kind of, I wrote it down so I remembered to say it, but now I can't find it. To remain some kind of level of privacy and being a little discreet in everything. It's not necessary for me to tell the public at large every little moment of stuff, because I think some of that stuff deserves to be kept between my parents and myself and my sisters and all our spouses and the grandkids and things like that. So as the weeks go on, I'll definitely, if I feel it's appropriate, to update on what's happening. But the family definitely appreciates prayers and thoughts. I didn't bring this up today as a way to bring attention to myself in any form. But you know, I've had a lot of friends and family already reach out, you know, and it's typical. And I think it's genuine feelings to where people want to extend or offer their company, or if you need something or anything you need, just let us know and we'll help you out. At the moment, I can't think of any circumstance where we would benefit from anything like that necessarily, but just, you know, your prayers are number one. That would be the biggest thing. I did talk to a longtime great drummer friend of mine yesterday. I talked to him for a little over an hour on the phone, and he said if I needed some relief in my teaching business, that he would definitely sub for me if needed. And you know, so that's there and available if I need to take advantage of that. And it would, so that's a big relief, because, you know, I've got 40 some students that come here every week, and my students know what's going on too. It's been a long week of sharing of this information over and over and over again. It doesn't, you'd think it would get easier, but it's just not relaying that information. So I'm probably going to wrap this up it's I normally go an hour. I'm near that time, but I think I need to decompress a little bit before moving on with my day.